Hi everybody, we are doing lesson 8.6. We're actually going to be doing polygons in a coordinate plane, and we're actually going to find the distance between points. And I know this is the right slide. I know in elementary school, you might have just counted and went for this position, for this question, you might have just counted and said, well, it's 1, 2, 3 points away. But once you start getting to decimals and fractions, it's a little bit harder to do. So we need to actually figure out how to do it by using absolute value. So here is a couple of things that you could write down. I'm going to use a nicer color than red. Okay, so just so you understand, if you have your two coordinates and they are in the same quadrant, so if you remember what quadrant means, you have 4 quadrants. This is actually, looks like this is quadrant 1, this would be quadrant 2. So if you notice, these 2 points are in the same quadrant. And we're in the same quadrant, you're going to subtract. And you're going to subtract the absolute values, and we'll show you how to do that in a minute. If they are in different quadrants, so if I show you down here, see how they are in different quadrants down here? So if they're in different quadrants, you're actually going to add the absolute values. And the reason why is because if you subtract, you're going to go 1, 2, if you notice, you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the distance is 5 away from each other. But if you subtract the absolute values, you're going to see you're not going to get 5. And it's the reason why is because you're going across an axis. So you actually are counting from this coordinate to the axis and this coordinate to the axis. All right. So we're actually going to do these two problems together. And I'm going to erase this just for a little bit extra practice. So we're going to go back up here. So when they give you these two ordered pairs, you really want to line them up. So you want to do -6, 2. And then you want to write right underneath it, -3, 2. And if they don't give you a graph and they just give you the ordered pairs, that's okay, because you can find if they're in the same quadrant or a different quadrant just by looking at the ordered pairs. So I know that these are in the same quadrant because your y-axis are both positives and then your x-axis are both negatives. So they are in the same quadrant. So because they're in the same quadrant, I know I'm going to subtract. So I need to subtract the absolute values of what's different. So if you see these 2's, your y-axis, you're going to cross those off because they're the same. So you're going to take the other 2 integers that you have and you are going to subtract. But be careful. You want to make sure you take the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value because you're finding distance. And I want to put a little asterisk here. Distance is always positive. Always positive. So you will never have a negative number when you're talking about distance, okay? So we're going to take the absolute value of -6, and then we're going to take the absolute value of -3, and we're going to subtract them. And I do understand that -3 in reality is the greater one on a number line, but this is absolute value. And so absolute value of -6 is greater. And you're going to do 6 minus 3, which is 3. So the distance, let's count. 1, 2, 3. We're correct. The distance from -6,2 to -3,2 is 3. Okay. So now let's do the next one. Oh, I went to the wrong slide. Okay, so let's do this one. All right. So for the next one, here we go. We have 2, 1, and then 2, -4. Always write them up and down. So we're going to look to see if they're in the same quadrant or different quadrant. So I know by looking at the graph, at the coordinate plane, I do see that they are in different quadrants. But what if they didn't give it to you? So I see in the x-axis, they're both positive. So far, so good. But in the y-axis, I see a positive and a negative. So that means they're in different quadrants. Okay, which means if they're in different quadrants, you're going to add. So we're going to cross off our x's. We want them gone because they are the same. And we're going to take the absolute value of -4 and the absolute value of 1, and we're going to add them together. And then we're going to say 4 plus 1, which gives me 5. And I believe that's what we got before. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So our distance is 5. Okay, so now let's go to the example. And then I did find out from the last video I practiced with that when I played the video, the volume actually didn't work. So I'm actually going to do what I usually do in class. And I'm going to play it, pause it, and then I'm going to make it enlarged. All right, actually, no, I have to make it small so I can do the writing. Okay, so it says find the distance between -3 and -5, and then 2 and -5. So they give you a graph, and if it helps you, I want you to graph. And then if you just can do it right from seeing the ordered pairs, you can absolutely do that too. So they give you -3, -5, and they give you 2, -5. So think about it. See if they're in the same quadrant. Are all the x's the same, the y's the same in values of the negatives and positives, not numbers. So it looks like your y's are the same. They both have negatives. But when you look at the x's, it looks like you have a -3 but a +2. So this is telling me that it is a different quadrant. So because it's a different quadrant, we are, if you notice, negative, negative, it would be down here. And then +2, -5 would be here. So if you notice, there they are in different quadrants. All you have to do is, you need to add. So these are the same, so we're going to cross off. So that means we need to work with -3 and absolute value of 2, and we're going to add them. So 3 plus 2 is 5. And if you notice how I'm showing my work, this is what I need to see from you on your paper. I don't want to just see just this on your paper. All right. You don't have to graph if you don't want to. If you can do it without the graphing, that's fine. But I do need to see the absolute values. I need to see that you're adding and that you're definitely making it not absolute. You need to solve them. So you need to write the 3 and the 2. 3 plus 2 equals 5. All right, so let's scroll down. And I'm actually going to Oh, didn't want to do that. Sorry. I want to go. I went too far. There we go. That's what I want. Oh, I did it again. I pressed the arrow too close. Okay. Let's scroll down a little bit. This is what I want. Okay. So we have 3. Oh. All right. So we have 3, -2.5. And then we have 3, -5. So let's see if they're in the same quadrant first. So I'm looking at my x's and they both have positives. So it looks like they're good so far. And if I look at my y-axis, they're both negative. So that means that they are in the same quadrant. So when they're in the same quadrant, you are going to subtract. Okay, think of the 2 s's, same and then subtract. Okay, and then you also could think of different quadrants, different for difference. You could think of that for your d's. All right, so we are going to take away my 3's because they are the same, and I'm going to do the absolute value of -2.5. Oh, excuse me. And I'm going to subtract, but that means that I need to do my lesser value last because I'm finding the difference. I need my greater value. So I'm going to do the absolute value of -5 first. Subtract it from the absolute value of -2.5. And then I'm going to say 5 minus 2.5, which gives me 2.5. Okay. And then if you want to see how they actually show your answer, I'll go to the ending. So if you look here, this is how you would have your answer. So the distance between -3, -5 and 2, -5 is 5. So that's how you would have your final answer. All right. All right, so let's go to our try-its. And I'm just going to erase a little bit here. We just have 2 try-its to do. Okay, so it says to find the distance between the points -6, 6.5 and -2, 6.5. Okay, so looking at this, we have to first find if they're in the same quadrant or different quadrant. So looking at it, my x's have 2 negatives. They both have a negative, so far so good. And my y's they're both positive. So it looks like we have the same quadrant. So the same quadrant means that we are going to add, subtract. That was my fault. Okay, so we are going to cross these off, and we are going to do an absolute value of -6, and we're going to subtract it from the absolute value of -2. And then 6 minus 2, which gives us 4. Okay, so that is for number 3. And let me bring to the arrow, do some erasing. Oh, I went to the wrong question. I'm sorry. We got to go back. And I want to do number 4. There we go. Okay, so number 4, we're going to do -4, 2. And then we're going to do -4, -5. So let's take a look. Let's see if they're in the same or different quadrants. So my x's, here's my x's. They both have negatives, so far so good. But when I go here, my 2 is positive and my 5 is a negative. So that means that they are in different quadrants, which means we need to find the difference, which means we need to different quadrants means we need to add. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to cross off our -4s, and then we're going to do the absolute value of -5. We're going to add it to the absolute value of 2. So we're going to do 5 plus 2, and then 5 plus 2 is 7. Right? And that's finding our distances between 2 ordered pairs.